I want to tell you something that I have never heard a single man say out loud, but that I have watched play out in front of me more times than I can count. The moment a man stops chasing a woman, genuinely stops. Not as a strategy, not as a game, not as a calculated move to make her miss him, but because he has actually redirected his energy back toward his own life, that is the moment everything changes. Not sometimes. Every time, without exception. And I say that as a woman who has felt it happen from the inside. I know what it is like to be the woman on the other side of that shift. I know what it feels like when a man whose attention you had become quietly accustomed to suddenly stops reaching. And I need you to understand something about what happens in a woman when that moment arrives, because it is not what most men expect. It is not relief. It is not indifference. It is not the comfortable settling that happens when something mildly annoying finally stops. What it actually is, and I am going to describe this as precisely as I can because the precision matters, is a sudden and disorienting awareness of absence where there used to be presence. Like a sound you did not realize was there until it stopped. Like warmth you did not know you were standing in until you stepped out of it. And that awareness, that specific, slightly startling recognition of something gone, is the first moment real attraction becomes possible between two people. Because you cannot miss what has never left. Most men have been told the wrong thing about this. They have been told that chasing is a sign of caring, that persistence is attractive, that showing up consistently and making your interest clear and being reliably available is what good men do and what good women respond to. And there is a version of all of that which is true in the right context at the right stage with the right person. But there is another version of it that most men are living without realizing it, and it looks completely different from the inside of the woman receiving it. When a man chases, when he initiates every conversation, follows up when she goes quiet, makes himself available whenever she appears, and calibrates his emotional state to her level of response, what she actually receives, not consciously, but in her body and her nervous system, is pressure. Low-level, constant ambient pressure. The pressure of being someone's primary source of emotional return. The pressure of knowing that her response matters more to him than his own equilibrium. And pressure, no matter how kindly it is delivered, no matter how genuine the feeling behind it, does not create desire. It creates management. She begins, slowly and often without realizing she is doing it, to manage him, to manage how much she responds so he does not escalate, to manage her availability so she does not send the wrong signal, to manage the entire dynamic with a low background effort that is invisible to her until the day it suddenly stops being necessary. And on that day, the day he stops chasing, two things happen simultaneously. The management ends, and the absence begins. The ending of management feels like relief. The beginning of absence feels like loss. And loss, as I said earlier, is where real attraction starts. Now I want to be very specific about what stop chasing actually means, because this is where most of the advice you have encountered gets it completely wrong. Stop chasing does not mean disappear. It does not mean go cold. It does not mean punish her with silence or manufacture mystery by being deliberately unavailable. All of those things are still forms of chasing because they are still organized around her. They are still using her as the reference point for every decision about your own behavior. If you go quiet because you want her to notice, you are still chasing. You have just reversed the direction. The goal is still her response. The needle of your attention is still pointing at her, even when it appears to be pointing away. Genuine stopping looks completely different. Genuine stopping is when the needle of your attention moves back to your own life and stays there because your own life is actually worth attending to. It is when you stop checking to see if she has responded, not because you are disciplining yourself against the urge, but because you picked up something more interesting and the urge is simply no longer the loudest thing in the room. It is when you go to the gym, not to look better for her, but because moving your body makes you feel like yourself again. It is when you make plans with people who matter to you, not to appear busy, but because those people matter to you and you have been neglecting them. It is when you return to the project or the ambition or the part of your life that you set aside while you were making her the center of it, not as a performance of moving on, but as a genuine act of returning to yourself. And here's what happens on her side when that shift is real rather than performed. She feels it. Women feel the difference between a man who is genuinely occupied and a man who is pretending to be occupied. I cannot fully explain the mechanism, but I can tell you from personal experience and from every conversation I have ever had with women about this that we know. We know when the distance is strategic and we know when it is real. Strategic distance creates mild curiosity at best. Real distance, the distance that comes from a man who has actually returned to his own life and is no longer organized around our response, creates something else entirely. It creates the specific and slightly uncomfortable sensation of having been removed from the center of someone's world. And for a woman who had become quietly accustomed to being in that center, that removal is not comfortable. It is noticeable. It is significant. And it prompts something in her that chasing never could. It prompts her to ask, without necessarily knowing she is asking, what changed? Not in a panicked way, not immediately, but as a background question that runs underneath her daily life and keeps returning. Something shifted and she does not fully understand what. And that question, that unresolved curiosity about a change she can feel but cannot name, is what eventually moves her. Not toward you as a strategy target. Toward you as a person she suddenly finds herself genuinely curious about again in a way she had stopped being while you were consistently available. Let me tell you what this looks like in concrete terms because abstract principles are easy to nod at and forget by tomorrow. You stop texting first. Not because you are withholding, but because you have noticed that every conversation you have been having recently has started with you. And you realize that a conversation only you are starting is not really a conversation. It is a performance you are giving to an audience that has not asked for it. So you stop, not to punish, not to test, simply because you have recognized the pattern and you are no longer willing to maintain it unilaterally. You stop monitoring her social media. Not because you are disciplining yourself against looking, but because you have recognized that what you find there never makes you feel better. It either confirms your anxiety or inflames it. And you have decided quietly and finally that your emotional state is not something you are willing to outsource to her posting schedule. So you remove the habit the way you would remove any habit that is costing you more than it is giving you, without drama, without announcement, simply by stopping. You start returning calls you have been putting off. You start finishing things you started before she became the thing you were primarily thinking about. You start having the kinds of conversations with the people in your life that remind you who you are when you are not in pursuit of someone's approval. And gradually, over days and then weeks, the version of you that existed before you made her, the organizing principle of your attention begins to reassemble itself. You remember what you think about when you are not thinking about her. You remember what you are good at. You remember what you find genuinely interesting and what makes you laugh and what kind of person you want to be in the world. And as that version of you becomes more present and more real, something in the quality of your energy changes. You become, without trying to, without performing it, someone who is fully occupied with something worth being occupied with. And that quality, that particular gravity of a man who has returned to himself is the most compelling thing a woman can encounter from a man she has been taking for granted. Because here is the truth that nobody in this space is willing to say clearly. She was not indifferent to you. She was not over you. She was simply comfortable. She had learned through your consistent availability that you would be there when she was ready. And comfort in attraction is the enemy of desire. Desire requires a small amount of uncertainty, not anxiety, not game playing, but the genuine and unmanufactured uncertainty that comes from a man who is actually living his own life and does not have infinite availability to offer because he has things that matter to him that are not her. When you give her that uncertainty honestly, not as a tactic, but as a byproduct of genuinely returning to yourself, the dynamic between you shifts in a way that no amount of strategic silence or calculated unavailability ever produces, because she is not responding to a move. She is responding to a man who no longer needs her to feel complete, a man who is interesting again because he is genuinely interested in things that are not her, a man whose attention, when it does land on her, feels different now because it is no longer the attention of someone who has nothing else to attend to. It is the attention of someone who chose in that moment to give her something he is not giving to everything. That is worth chasing, and she will feel the difference. And here is the part that nobody tells you, the part that comes after the shift, because most content about stopping the chase ends at the moment she comes back. It treats her return as the destination, as the proof proof that the strategy worked as the finish line. And in doing that, it completely misses the most important thing that has actually happened through this entire process. The most important thing that happened was not that she came back. The most important thing that happened was that you became someone worth coming back to. And those are not the same thing. They look similar from the outside, but they are completely different on the inside. And the inside is where you are going to live for the rest of your life. The man who stops chasing as a strategy and then resumes the same patterns the moment she responds has not changed anything. He has completed a temporary maneuver and returned to the dynamic that was not serving him in the first place. And she will feel that too. She will feel the resumption. She will feel the moment his attention floods back toward her and his own life recedes again. And consciously or not, she will recognize that nothing fundamental shifted. He was just on pause. And the dynamic will reset to exactly where it was before because nothing at the root of it changed. The man who stops chasing because he genuinely returned to himself and who continues to be returned to himself even after she responds, that man has created something different. He has created a dynamic where his attention is genuinely valuable because it is genuinely selective, where his presence means something because his absence is also real, where she is not the organizing principle of his emotional life, and she knows it, and that knowledge, that awareness that she is chosen rather than defaulted to, changes everything about how she experiences being with him. This is what you are actually building when you stop chasing. Not a tactic, not a temporary repositioning to trigger a response, a life that is worth living independent of her answer, a self that is worth being independent of her validation. And when she comes back, if she comes back, she is coming back to that. To a man who is whole, to a man who chose her from a position of fullness rather than reaching for her from a position of lack. And that choice, freely made by a man who did not need to make it, is the most attractive thing one human being can offer another. So here is what you actually do. Starting today, not tomorrow, today, you write down the 3 things you were building or pursuing or genuinely caring about before she became the center of your attention. Not goals you think you should have, the actual things that used to matter to you before they got quietly set aside. The project, the friendship you have been neglecting, the physical practice you abandoned, the ambition that felt real before it got crowded out. Write them down, and then do one small thing toward one of them before the day ends, not to fill the time, not to distract yourself, because those things are yours. They belong to you. They are the material of the life you are supposed to be building. And the man who is actively building something is a fundamentally different man than the man who is waiting for a woman to determine whether his life has meaning. You stop measuring your day by whether she responded. This one is harder than it sounds because the habit runs deep and the checking is often automatic. But each time you notice yourself reaching for your phone to see if she has replied, you redirect that energy physically. You do something with your hands, you move your body, you return to whatever you were doing before the urge arrived. Not with frustration, not with the white-knuckled effort of someone suppressing something. Simply with the calm redirection of someone who has decided that his own life is more interesting than her silence. And you stay. You stay in your own life long enough for it to become real again, long enough for the momentum to rebuild, long enough for the version of you that existed before you made her the center of your attention to become not just a memory, but a present reality. Because that man, the one who is fully in his own life, genuinely occupied and genuinely himself, is the man she is going to encounter when she reaches back out. And the encounter will be different, not because you played it correctly, because you actually changed. You are not the man who waits for her to decide his value. You are the man who already knows it and is busy demonstrating it to himself every single day. You are not the man who monitors her activity for clues about his standing. You are the man whose own activity is interesting enough to occupy his attention completely. You are not the man who needs her to come back to feel whole. You are the man who is already whole and who will welcome her back if she comes from that wholeness. That is who you are now. That is who you have been becoming this entire time. And she will feel the difference the moment she hears your voice again. Keep moving.